The afternoon light poured through the cafe window, striking the table where Adil sat pretending to read a book he'd already finished days ago. He liked the illusion of concentration, it kept people from asking questions he wasn't ready to answer. The noise of steaming milk and soft jazz blurred around him until the door opened and Ryan stepped in. For a moment, the world seemed to hush. Ryan wasn't extraordinary in the usual sense, no model's precision, no showy confidence, but something about his quiet poise unsettled Adil's practiced calm. He watched the newcomer search for a seat, fingers brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. When their eyes met, it was no accident. Ryan smiled, the kind of smile that suggests he recognizes you from somewhere, even if he doesn't. Adil looked away first. His pulse beat faster, though he told himself it was silly. He had a partner, Sammy, patient and dependable, someone who knew how to steady him when anxiety pressed too close. Yet lately, Adil had begun to feel like a guest in his own relationship, moving through polite routines that no longer reached the heart. Ryan ordered coffee and took the seat opposite. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, voice soft but certain. "Not at all," Adil replied, hoping the tremor in his tone went unnoticed. They spoke at first about harmless things, the weather's sudden heat, the cafe's music, the book in Adil's hands. Ryan's laughter was unguarded, like a melody freed from discipline. He had a way of listening that made Adil feel seen rather than observed. Each question he asked carried genuine curiosity, and each silence between them felt comfortable instead of awkward. Minutes turned into an hour. Adil learned that Ryan was new in town, working in design, still searching for people who made the city less strange. "You're the first person I've met who doesn't sound tired of living here," Ryan said. "Maybe I just sound tired in a different way," Adil replied before realizing how honest that sounded. Ryan tilted his head, studying him. "Then I hope you find a reason not to be." Something in that line lodged itself in Adil's chest. He smiled, but the words followed him long after the conversation drifted elsewhere. When Ryan left, their goodbye carried an awkward hesitation, 2 seconds longer than politeness required. That night, Adil replayed the encounter while Sammy spoke beside him about weekend plans. He nodded at the right moments, but his mind wandered back to the cafe, the way sunlight had caught Ryan's eyes, the warmth in his voice. Guilt pricked at him, faint but undeniable. It wasn't love, he told himself, it was curiosity, the mind's small rebellion against routine. The next day brought a message. "You left your bookmark at the cafe. Want to come get it?" Adil hadn't realized he'd dropped anything, yet the excuse felt both transparent and irresistible. He typed back, "Sure." "When?" They met again, this time under a gray sky that promised rain. Conversation came easier, familiarity already woven between them. They walked through the park until drizzle forced them beneath an awning. Ryan spoke about beginnings, the thrill and the fear of not knowing what something might become. Adil listened, his heart tightening with recognition. When the rain eased, Ryan said, "Maybe we could talk somewhere quieter. I'd like to hear more about your book." Adil hesitated. He thought of Sammy waiting at home, of the dull comfort that awaited him there. Then he looked at Ryan, open, expectant, unknowingly dangerous. "All right," he said finally. "My place isn't far." Ryan nodded, his smile gentle, grateful. As they walked side by side, Adil felt the air between them shift, charged but uncertain. He wasn't sure what awaited beyond his door, only that he had already stepped across an unseen line. The city lights flickered on as they disappeared into the narrow street, 2 figures moving towards something they didn't yet understand, but neither willing to turn back. The next few days passed in a quiet, uneasy rhythm. Aram went about his routine, work, messages, dinners with Faraz, but something inside him had shifted. Saad's words, his calm presence, the unspoken warmth between them lingered like a soft echo he couldn't silence. Every time Faraz called, his voice felt a little more distant, as if the line between them was stretched too thin to hold meaning. They still talked about ordinary things, deadlines, errands, weekend plans, but the heart had gone missing somewhere in the small talk. Faraz was always busy, always tired, always promising they'd make time soon. Aram stopped believing in soon that he found himself thinking of Saad instead, his laughter, his stillness, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through the armor Aram wore. Guilt threaded through every thought, but so did a quiet relief. With Saad, he didn't have to perform, he could just be. One evening, when the city sky was heavy with the scent of rain, Saad texted him, "You sound low. Come over." Aram hesitated, thumb hovering above the screen. He knew he shouldn't. But he went anyway. Saad's apartment smelled faintly of coffee and books, familiar and grounding. The lights were dim, and the sound of rain against the windows filled the silence between them. "You look exhausted," Saad said softly. "Rough week?" Aram sank into the couch beside him. "Just, everything feels off. Like I'm living two versions of myself." Saad tilted his head, watching him closely. "And which one feels more real?" The question landed heavier than intended. Aram looked away, his voice barely a whisper. "This one. Here." Saad didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, listening to the rain, letting Aram's confession settle in the air between them. It wasn't dramatic or romantic, just true, and that truth carried its own gravity. They talked for hours, not about love, but about weight, the kind people carry in silence. Aram spoke about his relationship with Faraz, how it had become a habit rather than a heartbeat. Saad listened, occasionally nodding, his expression unreadable but kind. At some point, Aram laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the release felt necessary. "I sound awful, don't I? Like I'm blaming someone who hasn't done anything wrong." "You're not awful," Saad said quietly. "You're human. People change. Feelings change. That's not betrayal, that's being alive." The word struck him like a chord he didn't know was there. For the first time in months, Aram felt seen, not as someone's partner or someone's mistake, but as himself. The rain softened into a drizzle, and the air grew cooler. Saad got up to make tea, moving with his usual unhurried grace. Aram watched him from the couch, the faint glow from the kitchen framing him in warmth. It was such a simple, domestic scene, yet it carried an intimacy deeper than touch. When Saad returned, handing him a cup, their fingers brushed, a small, accidental contact that felt impossibly significant. Neither pulled away immediately. In that fleeting moment, 1,000 unsaid emotions moved silently between them: affection, confusion, restraint. Aram broke the moment first, his throat tight. "I don't know what's happening to me." Saad smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of ache. "Maybe you're remembering what it's like to feel." The words were gentle but dangerous, and Aram felt their truth deep in his chest. They sat in silence again, drinking their tea, the rain fading to a whisper. Outside, the city lights blinked through the mist. Inside, the room pulsed with quiet tension, not of desire, but of understanding too deep to ignore. When it was time to leave, Saad walked him to the door. "Take care of yourself," he said simply. Aram wanted to reply, to say thank you, to say don't let me go back to pretending, but all that came out was a muted nod. As he stepped into the damp night, the cool air hit him like clarity. He realized he was standing on the fault line between two worlds, one built on loyalty, the other on truth. The choice wasn't made yet, but something irreversible had begun. The days that followed settled into an easy rhythm. Aaron and I began meeting at the pool almost every evening. It wasn't something we planned, yet somehow, we always arrived within minutes of each other. The pool had become our quiet place, a space between two lives that rarely intersected with anyone else's. We swam less and talked more. Sometimes we discussed work, sometimes memories, and sometimes nothing at all. There were long stretches of silence where only the sound of water breaking between us spoke. But those silences said enough. One evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled across the pool tiles, Aaron seemed unusually quiet. His usual smile lingered only faintly, replaced by something more thoughtful. "You ever feel like you're standing still," he asked, "while the world keeps moving?" I looked at him, unsure how to answer. "Every day," I said after a pause. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the water. "That's why I came here. I thought maybe if I learned how to move again, even just in water, I could start living again." His words hit deeper than I expected. I realized I'd been doing the same, floating through life, waiting for something to pull me forward. That we swam a few laps in silence before he suddenly stopped in the middle of the pool and looked at me. "You helped," he said simply. "Helped with what?" "With remembering how it feels to be seen," he replied. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. There was no hidden meaning in his words, only honesty, and somehow, that made them heavier. That we sat at the pool's edge again, feet in the water, the sky now turning deep blue. The hum of night began to rise around us. "I'm leaving next week," Aaron said quietly. "Work transfer. It's sudden." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, small at first, but spreading wider with every second that I tried to keep my voice steady. "So this is it, then?" He smiled softly. "Not it. Just another beginning." I wanted to say more, to tell him that this pool wouldn't feel the same without him, that his presence had somehow rewired the way I looked at simple things. But the words refused to form. Instead, I said, "You'll come back, right?" He didn't promise. He just looked at me, eyes steady and kind. "Maybe. But even if I don't, I think some people never really leave." We sat there for a long time, the quiet stretching comfortably between us. When he finally stood to go, he turned and added, "Keep swimming. Don't stop." And then he was gone. The week after he left, the pool felt different. The water still shimmered in the sun, but the silence was louder now. I still came every evening, out of habit at first, and then because it felt right, like keeping a part of something alive. That I remembered our talks, about stillness, about starting again, about rain and blessings. They lingered like echoes in the air. One evening, as I floated on my back, watching the stars blink into view, I realized something Aaron had been trying to tell me all along. Life doesn't always give us permanence, but it gives us moments, and sometimes, a single moment can change the direction of everything that follows. That I smiled at the thought, feeling the water cradle me. The loneliness I used to feel had softened into something else, not sadness, but gratitude. Gratitude for connection, for kindness, for the reminder that even brief encounters can leave lifelong ripples. When I stepped out of the pool that night, I looked back once more at the still surface. For a second, I could almost imagine him there, that easy smile, the sound of his laughter mixing with the water. Maybe he was right. Some people never really leave. I took a deep breath and whispered into the quiet air, "See you tomorrow." The words floated away, carried gently by the evening breeze, and though I was alone, the world didn't feel empty anymore.